Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Good day and welcome to everyone. Saya Malika akan memandu acara kita hari ini. Hello, my name is Malika and I will be the MC for today's event. Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, selamat datang dan terima kasih telah berkomitmen mengikuti diskusi tingkat tinggi yang diselenggarakan UNESCO bersama Koalisi Damai atau Koalisi Demokratisasi dan Moderasi Ruang Digital di Indonesia. Tema kita hari ini melawan ujaran kebencian dan disinformasi jelang pemilu Indonesia 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for your commitment to participate in high-level meeting organized by UNESCO and Koalisi Damai. Diskusi ini diikuti beberapa perwakilan stakeholder secara online. Seluruh sesi dapat berlangsung dalam bahasa Indonesia dan kami menyediakan interpreter dan alat bantu penerjemah untuk melancarkan proses diskusi dalam bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia. So if you are require assistance with Indonesian English or English Indonesian interpretation, please make use of the interpretation tools available. Bapak, Ibu, dan hadirin, papan nama yang ada di depan bisa diputar balik sehingga kita bisa saling mengenal satu sama lain. Ada beberapa yang belum diputarkah? Kita sambil menunggu kehadiran yang lainnya. Juga di setiap tempat duduk ada goodie bag. Di dalamnya itu ada riset yang sudah dilakukan CFDS, Center for Digital Society, dan Artikel 19. Oke, sedikit tentang acara hari ini. Koalisi Damai ini merupakan koalisi nasional untuk moderasi konten dan kebebasan berekspresi secara online yang digagas oleh 12 organisasi masyarakat sipil. Diskusi tingkat tinggi kali ini diselenggarakan dengan tujuan membuka ruang dialog seluruh pemangku kepentingan, yaitu perusahaan teknologi, organisasi masyarakat sipil, badan penyelenggara pemilu, pemerintah Indonesia, dan lembaga negara untuk bersama-sama mengidentifikasi tantangan membatasi penyebaran disinformasi dan ujaran kebencian selama periode pemilu 2024, dengan tetap memastikan penghormatan pada kebebasan berekspresi dan hak asasi manusia, serta peluang kolaborasi mempromosikan narasi perdamaian selama pemilu 2024. Selain itu juga memastikan akses informasi yang akurat, menjaga kebebasan berekspresi, dan keamanan jurnalis pada pemilu. UNESCO melalui program Social Media for Peace dengan dukungan European Union menyambut inisiatif untuk menciptakan praktek moderasi konten yang setara dan memperhatikan konteks lokal dengan tetap memperhatikan standar internasional hak asasi manusia dan kebebasan berekspresi. Nah, dukungan program ini tidak hanya berjalan di Indonesia, tapi juga di 3 negara pilot lainnya, Kenya, Bosnia Herzegovina, dan Kolombia. Kegiatan kita pada hari ini setidaknya ada 3 kegiatan utama. Yang pertama adalah seremoni penandatanganan komitmen bersama Ciptakan Pemilu Damai 2024. Kemudian sesi pertama akan ada pembahasan tentang kondisi saat ini yang akan ditayangkan secara langsung untuk publik melalui YouTube. Kemudian sesi kedua adalah diskusi tingkat tinggi yang akan dilaksanakan secara tertutup. Sebelum melangkah ke acara pertama, kita akan memulai terlebih dahulu untuk menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya secara bersama-sama. Para hadirin dipersilahkan berdiri. Hadirin dipersilakan duduk kembali. Terima kasih. Selanjutnya, kita akan mendengarkan sambutan dari Dr. Ice Khadijah MA, Ketua Harian Komisi Nasional Indonesia untuk UNESCO. Kepada Ibu Ice Khadijah, kami persilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Izinkan saya membacakan pidato saya dalam bahasa Inggris karena mengingat acara ini adalah acara internasional dan kami diminta dalam bahasa Inggris. Excellencies, Valerie Julian, United Nations Resident Coordinator in Indonesia, Stephanie Machati, Minister Consular, Deputy Head of Mission Delegation European Union for Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Commissioner of State Institutions, Government Representatives, representative of social media platforms, and the leaders of 12 members of Peace Coalition. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this high-level meeting on combating hate speech and disinformation ahead of 2024 Indonesian election. I'm honored to stand before you today to discuss a topic of utmost importance in our digital age. Together, we have gathered here to address the pressing challenges posed by hate speech and disinformation, and to shed light on a significant initiative, the Social Media for Peace. Special thanks also to the European Union for supporting this initiative and to SafeNet for its organization support. In the era of rapid technological advancement and the widespread influence of social media, we find ourselves confronted with a new battleground, which is physically unseen but spread as fast as virus. An environment where harmful content and narrative can spread like wildfire, leading to social division, polarization, and even violence. This is particularly critical in the context of upcoming election, as the power of information and the potential for manipulation are at their peak. In Indonesia, we all understand that we are facing historic election in 2024. And I know that many initiatives are underway by the government election management bodies, as well as platforms and civil society to educate the public and limit the spread of hoaxes. Today, we are here for a joint effort involving all actors to collaborate, identify the most urgent priorities, as well as innovative ways of tackling hate speech and disinformation. Recognizing the need to counter these threats with urgency, UNESCO, in partnership with the European Union, has taken the lead in implementing the Social Media for Peace project. This initiative embodies our commitment to promoting a human right-based approach and utilizing digital technologies for peace building and innovative policy making. Through the Social Media for Peace project, we aim to create a safer online environment that upholds the principles of human rights, freedom of expressions, and inclusivity. This project emphasizes the crucial role of responsible social media use, fostering dialogue, and combating hate speech and disinformation. By tackling the root cause of online toxicity, we strive to protect the integrity of democratic processes, including the upcoming 2024 Indonesian election. Research conducted as part of UNESCO's Social Media for Peace project clearly points to the need for better understanding of local cultural dimension for more effective content moderation. As a result, UNESCO has supported setting up Koalisi Damai 12 civil society organization, as each with its own expertise and network, who will work together to serve as an advisory forum to platforms, the government, and election management bodies. To achieve these ambitious goals, our collaborative efforts extend beyond the borders of Indonesia. We are proud to be working alongside Bosnia and Herzegovina and Colombia and Kenya, demonstrating that the fight against hate speech and disinformation is a global challenge that requires collective action. By sharing best practices, innovative policies, and lessons learned, we can strengthen our collective resilience against the threat posed by malicious online content. Moreover, the Social Media for Peace project is committed to fostering innovative policymaking. We recognize that traditional approaches may no longer be sufficient in addressing the dynamic nature of social media platforms. Thus, we seek to harness the potential of digital technologies to develop comprehensive strategies, regulations that strike the delicate balance between protecting freedom of expression and curbing harmful content. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today, we must acknowledge the significance of our actions and the impact they will have on the future of our societies. By joining forces through the Social Media for Peace project, we demonstrate our unwavering commitment to combating hate speech and disinformation and promoting peace building through digital technologies. Throughout this high-level meeting, let us engage in fruitful discussions, exchange ideas, and explore innovative solutions. Together, we can empower individuals, communities, and institutions to become responsible digital citizens and advocates for peace. By doing so, we pave the way for more inclusive, tolerant, and democratic society, and also demonstrating your commitment to building a safer and more democratic cyberspace for all. Thank you.
Terima kasih Ibu Ice Khadijah. Selanjutnya Hadirin, kita akan mendengarkan sambutan kedua yang disampaikan Ms. Valerie Julian, UN Resident Coordinator in Indonesia. Sambutan ini akan disampaikan melalui video. Kita saksikan bersama-sama.
Stefan Mechati, Deputy Ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. Ibu Ice Khadijah, Executive Chairperson of the Indonesian National Commission for UNESCO. And dear panelists, colleagues, participants, a very good afternoon to you all. It is my pleasure to join this important event on combating disinformation and hate speech, a topic that is of particular relevance for Indonesia in the run-up of the general elections that will be held next year. And I would like first to thank UNESCO for convening this event and for leading this initiative as part of their Social Media for Peace project. I would also like to thank and acknowledge the important role of the European Union, which has provided financial support for this project. So, next February, over 200 million Indonesians will be eligible to cast votes in 5 simultaneous ballots to elect the President, Vice President, members of the 2 chambers of People's Consultative Assembly, as well as members of local legislative bodies. It will be a tremendous moment for Indonesia. But as we have seen all over the world, political campaigns can be rife with spreading disinformation and hate speech. This is not new. But what is a relatively new phenomenon is the extensive use of social media that facilitates and multiplies the circulation and outreach of such disinformation and hate speech. According to the International Telecommunications Union, more than 2/3 of the world's total population is now online. That is 5.3 billion people, including more than 200 million here in Indonesia. Every day, people watch more than 1 billion hours of video on YouTube, and almost 3 billion people use Facebook. More than 70% of Indonesians have a Facebook account. And social media has overtaken traditional media as the primary source of news and information about the world for many. The proliferation of digital technology has been at the same time empowering and enriching, overcoming geographical and logistical challenges in accessing information. In an archipelagic country like Indonesia, this is especially important. Unfortunately, at the same time, it has also given way to massive disinformation, hate speech, and other forms of harmful content that are very damaging to social cohesion, civic participation, and human rights, and can even lead to violence. Earlier this month, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, and I quote, "The proliferation of hate and lies in the digital space is causing grave global harm now. It is fueling conflict, death, and destruction now. It is threatening democracy and human rights now. It is undermining public health and climate action now." End of quote. Indeed, the UN Secretary General gives such importance to this subject that one of the 11 policy briefs that are being prepared under our common agenda deals with information integrity and digital platforms. The proposals that are put forward in the policy brief aim to create guardrails to help governments come together around guidelines that promote facts while exposing conspiracies and lies and safeguarding freedom of expression and information. It also aims to help technology companies navigate difficult ethical and legal issues and build business models based on a healthy information ecosystem. The recommendations in the policy brief seek to make the digital space safer and more inclusive while vigorously protecting human rights. To effectively combat disinformation and hate speech here in Indonesia, we need cooperation among many actors: the government, election authorities, civil society, digital platform, with the support of international organizations. Today's event is proof that we can do that. Content moderation policies and practices which are normally determined by tech companies at global level, are not always adequate or sufficiently effective during the high-pressure environment of an electoral cycle. This is why the involvement of civil society is key to ensure that content moderation is based on deep understanding of local culture and politics and is in line with international standards and multilateral treaties on freedom of expression. In Indonesia, the National Coalition on Content Moderation and Freedom of Expression, known as the Damai Coalition, which was set up with the support of UNESCO earlier this year, can play a constructive role in the efforts undertaken by the platforms and election management bodies. It is made up of 12 independent civil society organizations. That way, Damai can mobilize its unique network and expertise to advise on concrete methodologies for monitoring harmful content online, designing risk assessment for conflict-prone areas, and proposing protocols for handling emergency situations among platform and election management bodies. I hope that today's discussion will lead to concrete plans for collaboration and a regular exchange leading up to the elections. The United Nations, with UNESCO's leadership, is committed to facilitating this process and to supporting Indonesia's democracy. With this, I wish you a fruitful and productive deliberation. Terima kasih.
Ya, Bapak Ibu, itu tadi kita saksikan bersama sambutan dari Ms. Valerie Julian, UN Resident Coordinator Indonesia. Dan sambutan berikutnya akan disampaikan Mr. Stefan Mekati, Minister Counselor, Deputy Head of Mission Delegation European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam.
Selamat siang, Bu, Bapak. Terima kasih for inviting me today to this wonderful event. And on behalf of the Ambassador of the European Union, Mr. Excellency Ambassador Vincent Piquet, I would like really to congratulate you for this wonderful occasion together with all main stakeholders. I would like to thank and to great indeed the representative of the United Nations, Mrs. Julian, Ibu Shojia from the UNESCO, who made a remarkable speech, and I have very few to add to this. I would like also to thank you very much for the participation of all stakeholders, and in particular representatives of the Indonesian governments, of the Indonesian institutions. It would be too long to name all of them, but indeed, I think this is very important for this gathering, that we have all main players around the table. And again, I would like to thank some of you from the coalition, from the social networks companies, from the press council, from the executive staff of the President of the Republic of Indonesia to come, because this is an important moment indeed, as it has been already said. I will not make a long speech. Okay. If you listen to me now, I will just stress that as we see the things from the European Union perspective, we are used to say that in a healthy and thriving democracy, citizens can freely express their views and learn information from transparent and pluralistic sources. They can effectively exercise their voting rights, participate in the public debate, and thus determine their future. These hard-won rights form the bedrock, the foundations of any democracy, and it indeed lies in the very heart of the European Union. So the democratic debate and the way that citizens of the European Union and Indonesian citizens have access to information have very much transformed in recent years, moving increasingly online. And indeed, next year, twice
on the 14th of February, but also in November, 205 million inhabitants and voters will be called to vote. And conducting elections in digital times is indeed very challenging for whatever country. We are facing rigorously the same issues, challenges, and problems within the European Union, exactly the same. And given, again, the massive scale of the voters, with a high internet penetration rate, the upcoming elections will be a tremendous challenge to undertake. Indeed, the spread of harmful content online, particularly hate speech and disinformation, has become an insidious threat to democracy and social cohesion, and again, within the European Union as well. This is also why, for the last 2-3 years, in the perspectives of the upcoming 2024 elections in June for the European Parliament, which will lead to the new European Union executive, the European Commission, and the High Representatives. In that perspective, the European Union has adopted recently a democracy package made of different proposals for regulating these issues, for engaging into a debate and into a thorough discussion with all stakeholders. So I would like again to stress that the European Union is facing exactly the same challenges and issues than Indonesia. So you are not alone, if I may say so, in this problematic. We face the same, and that is also one of the reasons why we are so committed to be one of your partners. But I would like to make very clear something which I think is extremely important. We are not here to give lessons. That's very important, to start with just that commitment. We are not just here to explain you the do's and don'ts in that domain. What we try to do, modestly, is to share our experience with you, if you are willing to share those experiences with us. And we want to be supportive of United Nations schemes, because the European Union has, on the very heart of its legal text, the commitment to always place itself under the roof of the United Nations. So this is why we are so supportive to UNESCO actions and United Nations actions. So again, everything has already been said by the previous speakers, so I don't want to spend your time by repeating again what has been very rightly pointed out. But just to say that among the issues, there is the question of the content moderation. Indeed, we all of us have that ultimate responsibility. And this is why the European Union, again, is very much committed, besides Indonesia and besides the international organizations, such as the United Nations and UNESCO in particular, to provide the possibility to come and to share with you the experience of experts, the experience of other NGOs, non-governmental associations, who are struggling every day, other journalists who are struggling every day for preserving moderation. I am very new in this country. I was previously posted in North Africa, so I have been very lucky to join your amazing country in September last year. My first feeling is that, culturally speaking, we share something very important. You may wonder, what is that? We are so far from each other physically. No, there is something that we share fundamentally. This is our motto: united in diversity. United in diversity. We are, respectively, so diverse entities made of different cultures, religions, languages, and we all care about our specifics, right? But nonetheless, we are united. So this is about that basically today, to remain united against disinformation, against propaganda, and to remain united in favor of moderation and defending all the tools in our respective modest capabilities, and sometimes not so modest capacities, to defend the best we can this. Again, as in Indonesia and as it is here stated in your documents and in your strategy, we rely on all counterparts. If one of them is missing, then I'm afraid we will continue to face the same problems. So we need all, not only the authorities, but we absolutely need the authorities, the government, each and single institution, but also the journalists themselves, the politicians, the political parties, the religious groups, all stakeholders. So this is why we are very supportive of this approach and of this meeting today. Something else. I said that we are not here to give lessons. Another very important element. We are not here to create any interference in domestic affairs. This is extremely sensitive, and I can fully understand that when a speaker coming from Europe comes here to give a little introduction speech, he or she might be suspected to come here and look what is going on in your country. This is not the case. Again, as I said, we are just here to share experience and maybe to talk about the best ways to handle those issues. So, again, I would like to thank you for inviting us, and I hope that you will, after this meeting, engage with us and that you will trust us enough to allow us to offer that possibility to bring experts, journalists, citizens experiencing from Europe exactly the same challenges and issues than you. And really, I wish you very good luck for this gathering. And again, once you will elaborate concrete proposals, recommendations, you will always find the European Union, besides you, open to discuss the best way to support your recommendations and your actions. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Terima kasih banyak atas sambutannya dan dukungan UN dan European Union terhadap Koalisi Damai pada kegiatan hari ini. Kita akan masuk ke kegiatan yang pertama, Bapak Ibu hadirin sekalian yang ada di ruangan ini maupun yang berpartisipasi melalui online. Ini sebagai salah satu upaya mendemonstrasikan komitmen kolaborasi semua pihak yang hadir pada kegiatan hari ini. Koalisi Damai mengajak seluruh stakeholder untuk menandatangani komitmen bersama ciptakan pemilu damai 2024. Jadi di depan ini sudah ada bannernya. Saya mengundang juga fotografer untuk standby. Di sini saya akan memanggilkan para perwakilan secara bergantian, dimulai dari perwakilan dari European Union, UN, dan UNESCO untuk terlebih dulu menandatangani banner ini. Mr. McCarthy. Yes. Sign the banner as a commitment. Yes. Okay. Ini satu UNESCO. Oh. Ana berarti. Ya, dari Ibu Ice Khadijah. Selanjutnya UNESCO, Miss Ana. Untuk selanjutnya mohon mempersiapkan diri perwakilan dari Kominfo, Komnas HAM, Komnas Perempuan, Bawaslu, dan KPU. Yang sudah hadir di sini mungkin salah satu perwakilannya. Pak Bagja dari Bawaslu, silakan Pak. Ya, dari Komnas HAM dan Komnas Perempuan. Bawaslu sudah KPU ya? Itu sudah ya. Perwakilan dari platform digital bisa mempersiapkan diri dari Meta, TikTok, Google, dan WhatsApp. Muter. Dari Koalisi Damai, SafeNet, Aji Indonesia, Perludem, Ekpat Indonesia, CFDS, Tifa Foundation, ICT, Mafindo, Jaringan Gus Durian, LP3ES, dan AMSI. Ya, koalisinya ada 12, jadi antriannya cukup panjang. Ya, boleh di bagian atasnya bebas. Haji udah, Mbak Ika udah. Ya, terima kasih untuk komitmen bersamanya. Lalu ini juga ada permintaan tambahan agar rekan-rekan yang tadi menandatangani banner ini untuk maju sekali lagi dan foto bersama.
Ayo teman-teman.
Take a picture. Okay.
Pak Bagja. Ayo, Pak. Ya, nggak apa-apa, Pak. Nanti yang muda-muda depan.
Agak sengaja sih nih.
Oke, the rest can boleh menempati yang muda-muda masih bisa di depan. Tiga.
Muat nih ya sepertinya. Sudah semua nih ya. 1, 2, oh kurang 1. Mas Wija. Ayo Mas. Untung ada yang inget nih, ada yang ketinggalan nih. Pimpinannya. Aman ya Mas frame-nya. 1, 2, 3. Sekali lagi. Sudah berkali-kali. Baik. Terima kasih. Langsung alhamdulillah bangun dari jongkok itu ya. PR banget. Baik. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu hadirin sekalian yang sudah mau diundang 2 kali ke depan ya untuk tanda tangan banner, kemudian foto bersama. Terima kasih juga sesungguhnya untuk komitmen menciptakan pemilu damai 2024. Nah, kita akan masuk ke
cultural understandings and international standards on human rights. Anyways, without giving away too much, I would like to maybe first ask Michael, who is joining from Bangkok. He's the interim head of Office of Asia Pacific for Article 19. So please, Michael, share some key findings from this research and also elaborate a little bit on what was exactly the research question and maybe list 3 to 5, let's say, key findings.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anna, and also to UNESCO and of course the excuse me, to the Damai coalition for inviting me to join today, and apologies that I couldn't join in person. As Anna mentioned, this is part of the Social Media for Peace project, and just as a slight addition to the introduction or the overview, Article 19 has been working with UNESCO on this, not only in Indonesia, but also in Kenya, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and from last year, Colombia. And in each of these countries, similar research was conducted, similarly trying to get at a more granular understanding of some of the challenges that exist when we discuss content moderation for things like disinformation or hate speech and sort of other harmful online content. And I think before going specifically into Indonesia, I want to just touch on a couple of the conclusions or recommendations from across all of the studies and reports, because there is a commonality. And I think it's important to identify the fact that there is a commonality in some of these challenges, because it means two things. It means, one, of course, that solving them, that addressing these challenges in the Indonesia context is kind of going to be complicated, because it's not only something that we're talking about in one country, it's something that we're talking about at a global level. But at the same time, this challenge presents us with perhaps a silver lining, because it does mean that it allows for platforms, regulatory bodies, civil society, other actors at the local, national, international, so forth level, through, I think, multi-stakeholder engagement, transparency, coordination, to seek to find universal solutions to what are effectively universal problems. So a few of the highlights across the project and across the countries is that social media platforms have lacked an understanding of specific cultural or societal settings and local languages. And this is not a new observation. It's been made obviously by others and for a long time. Also, that current mechanisms that have been set up by platforms to allow users to appeal content moderation decisions have been insufficient for a variety of reasons. And we'll get back to that in a moment, and I'm sure hear more about this from my fellow panelists, because this is in part the justification for the establishment of the coalition. And as a final point, again, that is universal across all of the studies and the countries that this happened, is inefficient levels of transparency in content moderation practices, from the community standards, perhaps, to why certain decisions were made, from an individual case level to larger policies. And some of this also relates back to issues around the lack of cultural or linguistic fluency from the companies, but also the localization, that certain explanations, the standards that are being used to make content moderation decisions just don't exist in certain local languages. This was certainly something that we found in the context of Indonesian. So turning to the report, and Article 19 released the report last year in June. It was conducted with support from a local consultant in Indonesia, doing a number of stakeholder interviews, engagement both with platforms, regulators, and with a number of the organizations from Indonesian civil society who later came together to form the coalition. And you'll hear some repeats of what I just said, but in the Indonesia context, we found that while there have been some efforts by platforms to conduct content moderation in line with local context in Indonesia, our research found that there was a disconnect between the global community rules, community standards, and enforcement at the local level, especially in so-called gray areas. And this is where speech becomes a little complicated. Again, perhaps because of linguistic or cultural issues, or it's problematic perhaps, but it doesn't reach quite to the level where international human rights law would say, under Article 20 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, for example, that which incites violence, or religious, racial, national violence, that it is mandated to be dealt with, or propaganda for war.
Just to jump
Those
in,
are the
Michael,
easy cases.
could you please
Yes.
define what is gray area content, and also what is content moderation? What are we really talking about, as opposed to content curation, for example? Just so everybody's on the same page. Maybe you can start with
Sure.
gray area content.
Sure. I mean, gray area content we're effectively dealing with, as the ambassador said earlier. Indonesia is a highly diverse country. And with that diversity, ethnic, religious, linguistic, comes content, comes belief, comes practices that might not necessarily have the same connotation across all writers, all readers. And this then creates challenges for content moderators. And the difference between moderation and curation is really the action. So when we talk about content moderation, we're talking about intermediaries, we're talking about hosting entities, not creating entities, and not those who are actively editorializing the material that's being presented. There is obviously conversation around how various algorithms within different platforms might have an influence on the level of the intermediary as a host, institution or platform that is just providing access to content that someone else has created, but then taking a heavier hand in terms of what is being pushed or promoted, then does raise some questions. But generally, when we talk about content moderation, we're talking about moderating content that is being produced by somebody else, but is being hosted by that entity, which is then doing the moderation. There's a whole set of international norms dealing with the role of internet intermediaries, the entities that are hosting that content, and a whole set of international standards dealing with content moderation. Probably most simply, the three requirements of proper content moderation are laid out in the Santa Clara Principles, and that requires that the platforms that are dealing with this content produce notice to individuals whose content has been affected in any way, whether that's been removed, blocked, downgraded. They release numbers. This is about transparency. This is about reporting how many pieces of content they're affecting. And third is an appeal process that everyone should be able to be notified if their content is affected in any way, and then have some mechanism to appeal that. And as we see in the study in Indonesia, these three sort of best practices laid out in the Santa Clara Principles are not being adhered to at the level that we would hope to see. But again, admittedly, this is a challenge at the global level, and again, it will require global coordination and global support.
Thank you very much. Oh, did you
Sure.
want to?
No, I mean, I can
Okay.
I can continue with the talk key points, but I also want to make sure there's time for the other speakers, and I can tend to get going too much. So if I can stop there as well, if you'd like.
No worries. So if I can summarize very quickly, the report found that there is inefficient mechanisms for appeal when legitimate content is taken down, that there is sometimes ineffective content moderation because of lack of cultural understanding and nuance, and that in general content moderation decisions or related algorithms lack transparency. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the transparency, accessibility issues are linked to one another, but also certainly to the challenges of localization.
Okay.
And when I'm talking about localization, I mean, there's noted challenges in a number of platforms that may publish, they may be very transparent about what their standards are for acceptable and unacceptable content, but it may only exist in English, or it may exist in a number of languages, but not Bahasa, for example. So we are looking at issues where there might be some better cases where these are not problems in other country contexts, where certainly at the local level, they do become problematic. And then because some of the standards for why decisions for removing certain content are maybe not accessible, it also creates problems for the accessibility of the appeal process for individuals whose content has been inappropriately taken down, or for that matter, and keeping in mind content that maybe has been inappropriately left up because it is content that comes into the category of incitement of racial or religious animosity, incitement towards violence. And so really it's crucial, again, just to reiterate, transparency and access for that appeal, which again, I think is justification for the establishment of the coalition.
Thank you. That's very clear. And we'll move on in a second to discuss how that's relevant to the upcoming elections. But in the meantime, I'd like to give the floor also to Bu Novi Kurnia from University Gadjah Mada, who led the research addressing regulatory frameworks in Indonesia. What is regulatory framework in Indonesia concerning harmful content? What were your key findings?
Oke, saya akan menjawabnya dalam bahasa Indonesia, tapi saya kira saya butuh teman-teman untuk ketawa dan tepuk tangan sejenak. Kenapa? Karena kita ada di sini itu berarti ada di ruang yang sama. Kita merasa bahwa kita perlu menciptakan ruang-ruang digital yang aman dan juga inklusif, yang menenangkan sekaligus menyenangkan. Jadi dari tadi kayaknya kita tegang, saya sendiri jadi ikut tegang. Nah, makanya kita mulai dengan seneng-seneng. Nah, apa sih yang ditemukan dari riset CFDS gitu? CFDS melakukan penelitian yang sudah ada di tas masing-masing ya di kursi, pengaturan konten berbahaya di Indonesia, kerangka hukum, tren dan perhatian. Jadi riset ini menjadi bagian dari riset sosial media. Akibatnya tentu semua konten berbahaya dapat dituntun secara pidana. Bisa dikatakan bahwa konten yang berbahaya itu sama dengan konten ilegal. Kenapa? Karena tidak ada perbedaan antara konten berbahaya dan konten ilegal. Semua jenis konten yang tercantum di media sosial maupun platform digital lainnya, kemudian juga termasuk yang mengandung disinformasi dan ujaran kebencian, itu kemudian mengandung konsekuensi gitu, mekanisme yang tentu mekanismenya pengadilan gitu, penuntutan pidana atau mekanisme non pengadilan, penyelesaian sengketa dan tindakan administratif. Itu yang pertama. Apa yang menarik yang kedua terkait dengan kerangka hukum? Yang kedua adalah istilah-istilah yang multi interpretatif. Kita masih menemukan istilah-istilah yang kemudian bisa diartikan banyak. Moralitas, bagaimana kemudian kita melihat sebuah konten di media sosial kemudian kita ini bermoral atau tidak? Yang seperti apa yang bermoral? Yang seperti apa yang tidak? Kemudian konten-konten yang dianggap mengganggu ketertiban umum. Apakah konten yang bisa bersuara atau menyuruh orang diam? Nah ini susah juga, seperti apa? Nah ini definisinya kemudian bisa menyebabkan multitafsir, salah tafsir dan juga kontroversi. Meskipun diskusi ini terus dilakukan tapi tidak mudah untuk kemudian berantem di pengadilan untuk konten-konten yang dianggap mengganggu ketertiban umum atau konten-konten yang dianggap mengganggu moralitas bangsa. Kemudian yang ketiga terkait dengan pendekatan hukum adalah Indonesia cenderung mengadopsi pendekatan yang punitif. Artinya apa? Ketika ada persoalan maka undang-undang digunakan untuk menghukum, bukan untuk kemudian mendiskusikan gitu ya. Jadi undang-undang ITE, PP, PSTE dan peraturan Menkominfo 520 ini menawarkan klasifikasi konten bersama sebenarnya, tapi kadang kala gitu penyelesaiannya cenderung kemudian bersifat menghukum. Kemudian yang bagian kedua yang penting untuk di underline adalah mengenai tren dan kekhawatiran yang kemudian muncul di riset CFDS. Riset CFDS ini dilakukan dengan berbagai macam metode. Yang pertama adalah legal studies, kemudian yang kedua adalah studi pustaka, yang ketiga adalah seri FGD dan interview dengan platform maupun juga kelompok marginal yang terpinggirkan, yang kebebasan berekspresinya di sosial media kemudian terganggu, dan juga kita melakukan social media analysis dan roundtable discussion dengan berbagai macam pemangku kepentingan, baik pemerintah, platform atau media sosial maupun kelompok marginal tadi. Tren dan kekhawatiran yang muncul apa? Sebagian sebenarnya hampir sama dengan yang dihadapi oleh negara-negara lain, termasuk juga tadi yang sudah disampaikan oleh Michael, dan waktu kita mendatangi UNESCO Internet for Trust ya, konferensi di Paris beberapa bulan yang lalu. Di Indonesia ada 3 hal yang kemudian ingin saya tekankan. Yang pertama, tren dan kekhawatiran terkait dengan disparitas pengaturan dan mekanisme penanganan konten berbahaya antara pemerintah dan platform media sosial. Jadi kadang-kala ada ketegangan-ketegangan tertentu gitu ketika pemerintah kemudian menyuruh take down, sementara community standarnya menyuruh tidak, dan sebagaimana yang kemudian kasus-kasus terjadi. Ketegangan itu terjadi. Kemudian yang kedua adalah pengabaian dan transparansi gitu. Investasi masing-masing platform tentu dalam memoderasi konten cukup besar ya, baik menggunakan alat maupun menggunakan manusia. Tapi kemudian bagaimana transparansi itu dilakukan? Tadi juga sudah diceritakan oleh Michael gitu. Mekanisme-mekanisme sengketa tentu tidak mudah untuk dilakukan ketika ada konten mengganggu kebebasan berekspresi terutama oleh kelompok marginal. Kita ngobrol dengan 18 orang dari 3 kelompok marginal yang ada di Indonesia dan kemudian kebebasan yang terganggu. Mereka adalah pejuang hak asasi manusia, mereka berasal dari kelompok minoritas keagamaan dan mereka berasal dari komunitas LGBTQ+. Kemudian yang ketiga adalah peraturan tentang konten yang tidak proporsional yang kemudian merugikan kelompok marginal. Kebebasan berekspresi mereka terganggu dan kadang mereka dilaporkan karena dianggap kontennya itu misalnya tadi mengganggu moralitas bangsa. Saya kira itu yang kemudian bisa ditekankan dari penelitian yang dilakukan oleh CFDS UGM.
Thank you so much, Bu Novi. So what we find is that regulatory frameworks are often not in line with international standards since they're vague or there's no distinction between harmful or illegal content. what's interesting also to remember, based on what you said and what Michael said, is that behind these content moderation decisions or regulatory frameworks are real people, often from marginalized communities who get most affected and whose freedom of expression gets curtailed or who are not sufficiently protected from attacks. So that's something to remember, that we're behind all this online world are the effects on the real world, yeah? Before I move to Maswija to talk a little bit more about the coalition, both you and Michael, maybe you could talk about, in the context of the elections, this research was conducted last year, but now as we're looking ahead for the elections, maybe you could mention just 2-3 recommendations that you see based on this research, even small steps that could be done to ensure freedom of expression and at the same time safety online and trust in the elections.
Saya kira rekomendasinya ada yang jangka pendek dan juga jangka panjang ya. Untuk jangka panjang tentu saja kita perlu meninjau ulang tadi perspektif hukum ya, produk-produk kebijakan terkait dengan moderasi konten, baik itu dalam konteks digital platform maupun dalam konteks pemerintah. Tapi dalam konteks yang kemudian jangka pendek, saya kira ada banyak sekali yang bisa kita lakukan. Kenapa CFDS kemudian menjadi bagian dari Koalisi Damai? Karena CFDS adalah pusat studi yang ada di Universitas Gadjah Mada. Kami sangat mempunyai kekhawatiran, tapi juga kami sangat mempunyai keinginan untuk menjadi bagian untuk menciptakan tadi ruang digital yang aman dan inklusif. Kerja-kerja kami berhubungan dengan literasi digital, kemudian juga masyarakat digital, dan juga tentu moderasi konten. Dan dengan begitu, kemampuan kami untuk melakukan riset, melakukan training, edukasi di pengajaran maupun pengabdian kepada masyarakat itu menjadi bagian sebagai upaya untuk bergerak. Dan saya kira bergerak sendiri itu tidak mudah. Sehingga CFDS tentu saja bergabung dengan Koalisi Damai dan berharap juga bisa bekerja sama dengan Bapak Ibu semua yang ada di sini, baik lembaga internasional, pemerintah, platform, dan juga teman-teman dari berbagai macam komunitas yang peduli pada ruang digital yang damai untuk kemudian meminimalisir kemungkinan-kemungkinan resiko dari nanti meningkatnya ujaran kebencian dan juga hoax, terutama di pemilu 2024 yang tentu saja bukan hanya persoalan sampah informasi, tapi juga bisa mengganggu kehidupan bangsa kita secara psikis maupun secara fisik, karena kemungkinan ada riot gitu ya, kemungkinan ada kekacauan yang kemudian menimbulkan persoalan-persoalan kerusakan jasmani dan juga infrastruktur, itu mungkin akan terjadi. Jadi saya kira itu yang penting, Ana. Jadi saya kira kita bisa melakukan hal yang paling pendek, edukasi, dan bagaimana kita mungkin belum konkret kita mau ngapain bersama, tapi kita mulai dari tanda tangan tadi gitu ya, deklarasi, dan kita mulai dengan kerja-kerja bersama untuk meminimalisir hate speech dan hoax ada di ruang-ruang digital kita, karena kita nggak mau terseret ke hal-hal yang buruk seperti di tahun 2019 yang lalu. Saya kira itu yang penting.
Thank you so much, Bu Novi. Indeed, this joint commitment is very important, and the openness to collaborate. Michael, just a final word on, from your perspective, maybe also situating this conversation in international standards and frameworks. Obviously, hate speech and disinformation online constitute regulatory changes, and there's no clear universal definition also in the international law, as far as I know. So what would be your 2 cents in terms of a few recommendations for conducting these elections and making sure there's no over-regulation or under-regulation?
Sure. I mean, I think, simply put, for the sake of time, I mean, heavily following up just on the observations, momentarily presently stated, transparency and accountability are always important, but obviously in periods of election, it will be even more so. And also accessibility. And so what does that mean? It means ensuring that there is full transparency about all decisions that are being made well in advance and leading up to, during, and after the election, whether that's related to any type of campaigning, information, communications from individuals running for office, or people discussing it, identifying, inauthentic behavior, the type of tactics that are used to spread mis or disinformation. So not only tracking that, but being transparent about it, but also, where money is going to political advertising on platforms, ensuring greater transparency on political advertisements. And the accessibility point is also crucial, because the best way to get over some of the, say, linguistic or cultural, other sort of localization challenges is to just ensure greater communication, coordination, frequent consultation with multi-stakeholder, civil society, local representatives from think tanks, academia, civil society, and also for sure to ensure that through the local consultation process, that platforms and regulatory bodies up to, during, and after election cycles are also ensuring a space for the voice, the perspectives, the concerns of marginalized communities, and especially those who are most, often to be targeted and placed at higher risk during elections, as they become the sort of target of often, various discriminatory, campaigning and so forth. And to resist any kind of over-regulation, of course, to ensure then that any restrictions on the freedom of expression and access to information adhere to, at the very least, that they are provided for by law, and that law must be very clear, precise, not over vague. They must be in pursuit of a legitimate aim, which is laid out in Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and further explained, and certainly that they're necessary and proportionate and the least intrusive means. And so really it means that while we do want to see the moderation of harmful content, regulations that protect marginalized communities, but that any efforts to deal with disinformation or hate speech, which are themselves vaguely understood terms, any of those means are well within the very strict high bar for limitations on freedom of expression and access to information. Article 19, other organizations have a rich set of resources and literature pointing to more effective ways of doing this. Also, of course, the UN Office of Human Rights and others, the special procedures. There's quite a bit of information out there already, jurisprudence that point to how to address these challenges in a way that still protects and promotes human rights, and in particular, freedom of expression, access to information, and so forth.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate, the 2 publications are in the goodie bags you've received, so you will be able to consult them in more detail. Finally, we have a bit of time left, and I would like the chairperson of the Damai Coalition, who was elected by all the 12 civil society organizations, to tell us a little bit more about the coalition. We heard from Bu Novi and Michael what the research findings were and what led to the creation of the Damai Coalition. Please tell us, what is your vision and mission?
Terima kasih, Ana. Bicara terakhir di jam setelah makan siang itu bencana. Tapi saya mau bilang kepada Mbak Novi, ini Mbak Novi sudah lulus ujian tadi. Jawabannya sangat menarik, sangat concise. Kenapa demikian? Karena kami tadi rasan-rasan sebenarnya. Kami sama-sama dosen, Mbak Novi di UGM, saya di Undip. Mas Wijaya ini kayak kita mau ujian disertasi ya gitu. Saya mau bilang kepada Mbak Novi, jawabannya tadi itu membuat dia lulus kayaknya. Tepuk tangan untuk Mbak Novi. Oke, Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya ingin menggunakan waktu yang sedikit ini untuk menghadirkan keceriaan. Mungkin bisa PowerPoint saya di-share barangkali. Saya memberikan foto-foto dari event-event kita. Ya, jadi sambil menunggu fotonya muncul, Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya Wijayanto, saya kebetulan Direktur LP3IS dan juga diamanahi oleh 12 organisasi masyarakat sipil di Indonesia untuk menjadi Ketua Presidium Koalisi Damai. Siapa saja ini 12 organisasinya? Ini adalah organisasi yang menurut saya semuanya concern pada isu digital ya. Antara lain ada Mavindo, ada Perludem, ada SafeNet, Gus Durian, Ekpat Indonesia, AJI, ICT Watch, CSIS, TIFA, lalu kemudian AMSI, CFDS, di mana ada Mbak Novi di sana dan LP3IS sendiri. Hari ini yang hadir hanya sebagian sebenarnya. Sebagian yang lain bisa tampak di sana, dilihat di foto. Itu adalah satu event kita pada 8 sampai 11 Februari di Bogor. Selama kurang lebih hampir 1 tahun ya, kami tektokan melalui online, sebagian offline, untuk sebenarnya diskusi selama pertemuan-pertemuan online itu 1-2 bulan gitu, setiap 1 bulan atau 2 bulan Dan intensifnya adalah di Bogor, 3 hari berturut-turut. Kita kemudian mendeklarasikan diri sebagai Koalisi Damai gitu. Nah, mungkin ada yang bertanya-tanya kenapa kok mirip sama Mas Damar namanya? Ya memang itu kita bahasin dikit yang mudah ya. Jadi kepanjangannya adalah demokratisasi dan moderasi ruang digital Indonesia. Jadi kita berharap melalui Koalisi Damai ini maka demokratisasi dan moderasi ruang digital bisa kita wujudkan untuk menjawab permasalahan yang tadi telah dibahas ya setelah secara panjang lebar oleh Mbak Novi dan juga Michael. Nah, lalu kemudian izin untuk sedikit menyampaikan apa sebenarnya misi dari Koalisi Damai. Next slide please. Jadi koalisi ini bertujuan untuk mendorong moderasi konten dan kebebasan berekspresi terkait dengan Indonesia yang dilakukan oleh penyelenggara sistem elektronik sehingga merefleksikan pemahaman terperinci terkait konteks lokal, termasuk dimensi bahasa, sosial, budaya, dan politik, serta sesuai dengan standar internasional terkait hak asasi manusia. Bisa diamati di screen. Pada tanggal 16 Februari, koalisi ini kita launching bersama, 3 menit, baik Mas. Kita launching di Jakarta, di sana adalah foto ya, event ketika koalisi ini diluncurkan. Next slide. Lalu kemudian seminggu berikutnya kita mendapatkan pelatihan ya dalam satu konferensi internasional di Paris. Ini foto-foto dengan ada Mbak Inaya juga di sana, Mbak Inaya Wahid. Ketika lagi santainya, tapi sebenarnya di dalam ruangan sangat serius. Bisa dilihat next slide. Next slide berikutnya. Nah ini melebihi ujian disertasi ini. Di sana ada Mas Damar, tapi kecil ya. Tapi ya pokoknya itu Mas Damar di situ. Lalu kemudian ada 3 sebelum coffee break saya menyampaikan 3 tujuan dari koalisi ini. Yang pertama adalah next slide, membangun kemitraan yang setara, stabil, jangka panjang dan transparan dengan para pemangku kepentingan ya untuk moderasi konten dan kebebasan berekspresi. Untuk menciptakan praktik moderasi konten yang menghargai konteks lokal dan kebebasan berekspresi di Indonesia. Ini adalah momen pada waktu launching juga, di sana ada perwakilan dari Google dan dari kementerian ya, dari Mochi. Lalu kemudian berikutnya misi kita adalah untuk melakukan kajian, next slide please, dan advokasi kebijakan moderasi konten dan kebebasan berekspresi yang transparan dan sesuai dengan standar internasional. Nah, yang ketiga, meningkatkan literasi digital, ya, terutama dalam hal moderasi konten kepada para pemangku kepentingan sesuai dengan standar internasional, secara internal maupun juga kepada publik secara luas. Nah, ini adalah prinsip-prinsip atau values yang menjadi bonding ya kita, kesetaraan, inklusivitas, transparansi, independensi, dan seterusnya. Nah, yang terakhir saya ingin memperkenalkan Presidium Koalisi Damai, ada di sana, bisa dilihat di foto ya, ada Mas Damar Juniarto yang menjadi presidium ya, ketua presidium, koordinator presidium publik, komunikasi publik ya Mas Damar ya. Mungkin aplaus untuk beliau. Lalu ada presidium penelitian, ada Mbak Amel dari Perludem. Aplaus untuk Mbak Amel. Lalu kemudian ada Mas Muhammad Jawi ya, siapa namanya? Septian Aji. Ini menunjukkan bahwa saya baru mengenal beliau beberapa bulan terakhir lah ya. Dan selalu terkecoh oleh namanya, berubah terus. Mas Jack yang sekarang hadir online ya. Halo Mas Jack, sedang di Nepal sekarang. Lalu kemudian ada Mbak Ika dari Aji. Sudah ya, dan tentu saya sendiri 1 menit waktunya. Dan memang sudah selesai Mas. Mungkin demikian dari sedikit perkenalan Koalisi Damai. Bapak Ibu nanti tolong siap-siap untuk sering-sering disamperi oleh wajah-wajah tadi itu untuk diajak komunikasi lanjutan, karena pada dasarnya siang hari ini kita hanya semacam kulonwun atau permisi ya untuk kemudian komunikasi dengan lebih intensif dengan Bapak Ibu semua. Terima kasih, selamat siang.
Thank you very much, Wija. Indeed, this presentation and the plans you presented is a result of a lot of work and coordination work. This coalition consists of very different kinds of organizations. but which is a real strength because it brings different expertise, unique expertise in different networks. So from what we understand, your key 3 missions is to engage in a long-term transparent dialogue with platforms and the government and serve as an advisory forum, let's say, to enhance content moderation in line with freedom of expression standards, to conduct evidence-based research and advocate for better content moderation practices, and then to engage with the wider public and enhance digital media literacy. These all 3 plans are very relevant, obviously, to the elections. Would you say a few words about post-elections? What would be your vision for Damai?
Ya, pertama-tama tentang pemilu. Karena saya kebetulan adalah sarjana ilmu politik, saya belajar bahwa menuju pemilu, ya, informasi yang benar adalah seperti oksigen buat demokrasi. Kenapa? Karena melalui informasi yang benar inilah kemudian warga negara memilih. Seandainya informasi yang didapat adalah berisi hoax, hate speech, maka kemudian pilihannya bisa salah dan demokrasi dalam ancaman. Maka disinilah menurut saya Koalisi Damai berusaha untuk masuk, untuk membantu sebenarnya kerisauan yang saya pikir dirasakan oleh pemerintah, oleh negara, dan juga oleh digital platform tentunya. Nah, ke depan kita berharap bahwa komunikasi ini terus berlanjut sampai setelah pemilu, dan kita sebenarnya membayangkan adanya semacam satu forum ya, di mana dialog bisa terwujud, bisa saja itu nantinya berupa sosial media council atau dewan media sosial, di mana ada perwakilan dari masyarakat sipil, dari pemerintah, dari platform digital di sana, yang saya pikir kita semua punya visi yang sama, punya kepentingan yang sama untuk mewujudkan ruang publik digital yang sehat untuk masa depan bangsa. Kira-kira seperti itu. Ana, terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Thank you, everyone. I think with this, we are done with session 1. We don't have a Q&A here because the entire session 2 will be a roundtable discussion. And if you have any comments or questions, save them for after the coffee break when we'll have a open, safe discussion under Chatham House rules. Thank you very much. Thank you for those joining. Please stay online. We'll be back in 15 minutes.
Recording stopped.
Oke, terima kasih Miss Ana sudah memandu sesi pertama. Kawan-kawan kita agak molor sedikit, tapi kita coba bisa tetap on time. Sekarang kita masuk ke jeda minum kopi sebentar ya. Ada di ruang sebelah sana. Sementara untuk rekan-rekan jurnalis, kita persilakan ke ruang sebelah sini, akan ada konferensi pers bersama narasumber. Kita akan kembali ke ruangan ini 15 menit lagi untuk mengikuti diskusi tingkat tinggi yang dilakukan secara tertutup. Teman-teman jurnalis, konferensi pers dilaksanakan di sebelah kiri ruangan, keluar dari ruang ini. Kemudian coffee break ada di dekat tangga masuk ke ruang kita ini ya. Sekitar 15 menit lagi kita akan kembali berkumpul di sini untuk sesi kedua, yaitu diskusi tingkat tinggi yang dilakukan secara tertutup. Terima kasih.